Hi folks, it's Jaime Alejandro, and this is the Arts Calling Podcast, the place where I interview hardworking independent creatives in the literary, visual, and performing arts. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to give a quick shout out to the folks at Arcade Bookshop. These guys are friends of the podcast. I had the pleasure of collaborating with them over at the Coalition, and I was recently a guest on their podcast, Arcade Bookshop, which talks about the interesting convergence of storytelling in video games and literature. They're doing something really cool over there, and I hope that you get a chance to check it out. We had a wonderful time. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, the episode is live, and I hope that you enjoy it. So the link is in the episode description. Bryce, Caleb, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and I hope that you come over to Arts Calling so that we can continue the awesome chat that we had. And with that said, I am delighted to let you know that today I am Arts Calling Sam Chue. He is a local outsider singer-songwriter, and he plays a mix of his newest songs and a few tunes from the past. He has been playing original music in Bellingham and out of his car throughout the I-90 corridor since 2007, and he brings a refreshing spin to the folk genre. Sam and his collaborators are spearheading the Washington's Records label in the Northwest, and they're putting out some really interesting stuff. And I got to tell you, this was a beautiful conversation. This is an incredibly winning human being who is pursuing his creative gift in spite of really heartbreaking circumstances recently. And I was just really, really impressed with Sam's openness and his willingness to serve his community. We had an amazing time, and I hope that you enjoy it as well. And so without further delay, let's give Sam a call. Hello, is anybody there?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Oh, there we go. Awesome.
How you doing?
Hey, good, man. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you? You just asked that. So I have to be honest with you right off the bat.
Yeah.
I'm not Naegle, Fowleri. And Naegle Fowleri is a totally made up character. And this is a virtual band that you seem to have stumbled upon.
Yeah.
So my name's Sam Chue. I'm kind of like the mind behind it.
I love this. So let's get the ball rolling, because I really feel like this is a mystery that we should uncover on the podcast in conversation. So let's start off real quick. Tell me how you begin as an artist so that we can uncover this other identity. Tell me about you
cool.
first. Yeah.
So 2012 is when I really started playing music out and gigging, and that started with going on a tour, or being asked to go on tour with this band called the Dizzy Bats out of New York City. So I packed up in my little Subaru and went to start this like nationwide tour with them. And then by the time I got to Seattle for the first date, they said that they had some catastrophes. Half the band got sick and they had to just go home. And so they kind of canceled the rest of the tour.
Oh,
and I took over and made it to New York City, and took like a month from Seattle to New York and back. I got kind of addicted to the road in that way. It was a difficult life, but it was also, there's something about it that captured me. So kind of from then, I kept on driving around the country every summer once the weather got nice. And when it was winter, I just stayed in the Northwest and played and recorded. And I started a studio at some point, but my passion was always just recording arts.
So the Northwest is kind of home base for you still?
Definitely, yeah. I'm born and raised in Bellingham.
Oh, okay.
That's just 90 miles north of Seattle.
Nice. So when do you pick up an instrument for the first time? When is that for you?
So that was probably just a vicinity thing when I was really little. Ever since I was walking, there was always music and instruments in the house. So I have pictures of me sleeping with guitars when I was like 5 or 6.
So, what kind of music was playing in your house at the time?
A lot of Tom Waits. And my sister had a great collection of music too that she kind of kept in her bedroom. Um, and I would get a couple CDs here and there. I really liked. Well, I was kind of scared of one album called "The Pod" by Ween, and
Oh
like
yeah.
years later, it turned out to be one of my favorite albums ever. And yeah, song music like that. My mom was into like Tracy Chapman, Tom Waits, and yeah, it's pretty eclectic mixture of music. If I, once I got a hold of my sister's box of CDs, it was that was the nail in the coffin there.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're mentioning, Ween. You start out with that, at an early age, and it's like game over. You're going to go a completely different direction than most people, which is amazing. So, when do you start making songs? What's the inclination there? When does that begin?
I remember I was in middle school. One of the first times I made songs was when I got Pro Tools for the first time in like seventh or eighth grade. And like a lot of friends go up to the mountains during the winter time, and I didn't really ski or snowboard, so I just stayed at home during like the winter hours and just composed. And I started off with a lot of like soft rock sounding instrumentals, and then the first song I wrote with lyrics was an acoustic guitar song, and I was like, "Someday" was the name of that one. It's kind of about a song about wanting to write songs, and the song about the kind of songs I wanted to write. So
Yeah, yeah. So when do you begin working on your craft? Like you say, like consciously, this is something that's going to be a huge part of my life and I'm going to continue to develop. Is that like a thought that happens, or do you just organically pursue this path right off the bat?
I think like initially it started with just like it felt fun and it's something I do and something I didn't seem to stop doing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just music and making songs because it was kind of like just bored
Mm-hmm.
and it gave me something to fill my time with. I'll admit though, like after I started like writing around the country and identifying myself as a songwriter, I felt more pressure. Like I was a little bit more hard on myself when I wasn't in a creative streak with songwriting, and so I kind of pushed it a little harder then than I really, looking back, wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, I really don't push anything, and I hate to say it, but I hardly even hone my craft. It's like this is something that's just a part of me, and I'm not too attached anymore of sounding perfect or like making great songs that are gonna you know be my number one hit. Like
Sure.
my relationship with music, especially in this last year's completely changed, and it's solidified the fact that like I'm not doing this to be a virtuosic great songwriter for any reason. I'm doing it because I like can't literally can't stop. And I think the Taoists called it the fool kind of artist,
Uh,
and versus the professional or the amateur. I don't think I'm professional or amateur. I feel like I'm just kind of like this fool sometimes, and not in an endearing way.
hmm. Well, you're touching on something super interesting that I feel is really hard to get to, like a mentality that you feel like you've had some reality thrown at you for a little bit of time, whether it's being on the road or just living or trying to survive, that gets you to that point, right? Because it's not the default that some of us have. I mean, I feel like I myself have experienced some things like, if I just write it this way, it's going to get a lot more impact. Or if I just create something that's kind of like this, everyone's going to love it. And then I'm going to be catapulted or something. So I, I'm definitely curious of like, not to like bring out the painful part of this process, because it's not an easy process to arrive at that place of being the fool or being the one who is accepting of their burden to create, right? How difficult was that for you? Because right now it sounds pretty chill. Like it was like, okay, I had an awakening, but man, that's some tough times, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the experiences that I thought would give me clarity in that answer really didn't. Like playing lots of shows, being out there gigging and making music, it can be exhausting and you can't really take a step back and look at it sometimes. And for me, when I was really pushing it, really driving around the country, and really trying. I was struggling with this question within me. Like, it's just like, do I want to push it? Do I want to try to quote unquote make it against all odds, or do I want to exist? And no amount of gigging or songwriting or like working on the craft brought me closer to an answer. It was only when I found a lifestyle that I that I really loved. Um, and for me that meant making a family and falling in love with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what helped me notice, like, hey, I want to keep music enjoyable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, that meant keep it as kind of an accessory to process and express the world around me.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I met Victoria, my wife, it was really clear to me, like, that living a quality life was my highest priority, not making a hit song. And
Mm-hmm.
being as best of a person as I can be was my higher priority, besides trying to exploit a single that I worked for months on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not gonna lie, I kind of stopped music altogether when I met and married Victoria, and
Mm-hmm.
I strictly did it for fun, just inside my house. The life is so absurd and chaotic, and sometimes just devastating, that the moment you find something that makes you happy, it can be just taken away so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where else I'd get my energy from for recording and producing an album like Lyak, if I hadn't lost her, and it's still
Mm-hmm.
something I'm processing a lot.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
But I think that's the great thing about music, is that people who don't have tools like religion or occultism, they have we still have music,
Yeah.
and that's kind of a gift. I don't know how else to say it, but evolutionarily lucky card. I'm glad we got music in our brains, because it sure has helped me process a lot. I totally deviated from your question a lot, but
No,
like,
man.
to
No.
answer your question,
Yeah.
yeah, long story short, like, when did I know that my relationship with music was going to be more like not forced?
Mm-hmm.
It's when I ran out of energy, and I couldn't believe
Mm-hmm.
what I was going through. And I want to be not vague for the listeners. A year ago, in October, Victoria, my wife, um, and I were performing. She was performing her burlesque show, and afterwards we went dancing. And when we were parked downtown, we got hit by a drunk driver. And then we got hit again by the drunk driver, the same one, and got pinned up against a fire hydrant, and it was really scary.
Mm.
And the next day, Victoria ended up passing away, and I really don't. I didn't know what to do. And if anybody who's had traumatic loss like that can relate, that there's just no words, and it's completely impossible to wrap your head around.
Mm.
So yeah, that's where this newest album came from, is just like not knowing what to say or do, and also losing so much sleep that, like, this is making multi-track album was the only thing that really got me tired enough to fall asleep. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm still ranting again, but losing her
Yeah.
really fundamentally changed me, and I had no other energy for anything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to answer that question the
No,
best
for
I
sure,
can.
for sure. And listen, man, I sincerely appreciate you sharing this with me. It's something unimaginable and incredibly difficult, and I'm definitely thinking of you right now as you're sharing this. But as you mentioned, you find a pillar in music. You find something that will allow you to push forward at whatever pace you can, because there's no right or wrong pace to move forward with any of this. It is you trying to craft a life, new chapter, if that is even possible, with what you
Yeah,
have.
kind of crafting a whole new identity,
Mm-hmm.
you might say. Like
Yeah.
when you lose somebody that was your other half, you don't really know who you are anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
that was all the more reason for me to process all of that and figure out who I am again by creating all of these alter egos within the band.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Yeah.
felt like that was a really helpful way to step back from it all and try to figure out who I was now.
Yeah. And just so that we can let the listener know, so now we arrive at this point where you, this time around, have created various identities that make up a band, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there was at one point a released lore or a story, like short story book that was out, but due to likeness issues and there was no contracts basically. And there was a likeness of a character that was a local musician here, and they reached out to me and said that they're not comfortable with it anymore. So there's a rewrite going on of the band's lore,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a pretty extensive story um, and lore behind it, kind of inspired by the video game FNAF and then the band the Gorillaz, because my stepkid is a huge fan of FNAF, and I really respect how much work has gone into some of those stories and the backstory to the story. So I took a lot of inspiration from there, and I'm sorry,
No, man. No,
I'm getting a little bit
no, listen,
distracted from the question.
no,
My
this is
brain gets
perfect.
foggy.
Like, listen, there's no expectation here. It's just like, let's just kind of chill and try to kind of carve our way through this, because it's a lot, man. Like you've gone through a lot, and there is such a precious gift that you have, and your strength that you're sharing with me is incredibly inspiring, and I really care about the things that you're telling me right now. But you have the story, man, that you're building. You have this world that you're crafting that goes beyond music, and that is pretty wild to me, because it takes somebody who has a willingness to see in different dimensions, right? You have the music part of it, but you have this whole lore. And I'm curious how that has allowed you to kind of overcome, and what is sort of the silver lining that you're seeing in this story? How is that making things brighter right now?
Yeah, even though it takes so much energy to write that backstory, it also feels like it's writing itself in the way that you're not making anything up.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it makes me feel more sane is because I get to put all the fucked up shit. Excuse me, I don't know if we're allowed to
No, go
cuss.
ahead.
The messed up stuff like that I've gone through and my friends have gone through, and I just get to slap this character in there and see how they deal with it.
Mm.
And I don't know where I've heard that before, but I think that's a pretty common thing for script writers to do. I've had a really helpful friend down in California that works in the movie industry, and I've been able to talk to them throughout this process, and they've been really helpful as well, and just reminding me, like, write what you know. And that made this like it's a exhausting process because you're going through and reliving every single one of those moments.
Mm.
For example, there's a portion where the character Naegle Fowleri get hit by a drunk driver. It's not hard to see the parallels there, but in reality, in the story, not reality, it turns out that Kira Cracker, who's the drummer, she's actually the one who convinced that person to drink and drive in the first place,
Mm.
because he asked her to fill in on drums for a show, and she said, "You know what? I'm tired of this. No, just do what you have to do and get your ass down to the show." That unfolds into the whole situation with Nagel, and writing that whole thing, you know, at the same time where you feel like you're, excited that it's a good idea for the story's sake, you're also, I mean, I was also just like shaking because it was just, I'm just reliving it, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't me this time. It was Nagel, and so I just got to kind of put myself in every one of the characters
Yeah.
and see it from different points of view than myself.
That's such a, it seems like a powerful exercise, man, to try to just get it all out of your system and as much as one possibly can. But when you get to the music, how do you find, like, what are the first songs that you make, and what do they sound like? What do they feel like when you're crafting the first couple of songs for this project?
That's funny because like the very first song on this album, I recorded the bass ideas of it um years ago. Um and at that point it was just like this rhythm dum 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 ba dum bum bum ba dum. And Victoria was in the room with me and
Mm.
I was recording it just like this little stupid song idea. And I remember her being like, that sounds cool. And that's how some of them started, but about about 13 of the tracks, I don't have honestly a lot of memory about how they started because I didn't get a lot of sleep back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I know that I had is that I had this vision of a electronic drummer, a acoustic drummer, a synth player, a bassist, and strings.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on out, I just didn't know how to present it. I was like, this has to be a band. This is not a solo album anymore. To me, it seemed like a whole group. And so that idea just leached into the other idea. And since I made one idea, it just led to another. And my friend Tim Mechling helped me render up an album cover for Lyak, some of the images of these names that I came up with. And we kind of ran with it. It's kind of funny story how we got the names, just to be a little tangential. But I was thinking, like, what if people look up these names because they've never, it's kind of a small town here in Bellingham, especially in the summer when college people leave. But I was thinking, people are going to Google these names to find out who they are. And so I made it so they're only one letter off from a deadly disease or virus or
Mm.
organism. Naegle Fowleri, for example, if you type that up in Google, it'll say, did you mean Naegle Fowleria or something like that? Which is like this brain-eating, terrifying organism
Oh, wow.
that crawls into your nose and eats your brain, and that's the only reason it lives is to eat human brains.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, fact check me on that, you guys. Google the Google the band members and find all the dangerous ailments that they actually are. Um, you know,
So you're starting to create these personalities, and I love that. Listening to some of the songs, there is a cohesion there. I mean, because you're talking about creating in a very difficult time, very stressful, tumultuous time, but there is a logic in the way the music sounds and the characters that you're presenting. And this is from like a couple of tracks that I've heard, in the album, which this one's ready to come out, right? Or is it about to come out?
yeah, it might come out for streaming someday.
Okay.
Um, but it is out right now on CD, and out of what we initially pressed, there's about 40 copies left.
Okay.
So
I'll make sure if you got any links, I'll put them in the episode description so folks can click on that.
yeah, if people want to listen for free, there's the instrumental version. I know that's kind of like a bummer, but like just we're a record label too, and we're trying to change things up over here in Washington State. And just with for example, the first day that we had the CD out, we sold 8 copies,
Mm-hmm.
in the first couple hours, and that alone is equivalent to something like, I don't want to make up numbers, but like 100,000 streams
Mm-hmm.
equivalent
Yeah.
revenue. And so I mean, that's not the only reason we did it. That's kind of a secondary reason why we released it on physical media only. But for me, I wanted to avoid the post-stream blues, the flop blues, when you work on something super hard and then put it out for free and nobody buys it because it's for free and then it flops. So, in my opinion, we might put it out on streaming someday, but it means so much to me, this album, that I'd rather have less fans that I actually can interact with.
Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful, movement that you could be a part of, that, or that you're starting over there, because I feel like so much is out of our control when it comes to digital distribution, and the powers that be just keep shaving away profits. And to see this model happening and you making it happen with your record label, Washington's, which is a great name for a record label,
Thank you.
is really inspiring to me.
Yeah, so it started with my friend Tim and I, Tim Mechling. We had a lot of similar artistic visions, and we were fans of a lot of similar artists out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought this idea to him about a year ago, and he was completely on board. And he actually had the idea, the band or the name Washington's
Mm-hmm.
in mind. I was going to call it something like Smoking Dog Records, but he had the whole idea of like a review company that they wanted to do. And so we kind of meshed up these two ideas. We made Washington's Records, and our model right now is that we are doing as many local reviews as possible of LPs and EPs. And they're a little bit different in the sense that they're like, I call them like ethnomusicological reviews, because they take a look at the context socially and geographically of the music that we're releasing, that we're reviewing. Right now, for example, I'm working on a review for a local rapper named Estimate, and OG Neeks is with him on this album called Bright Ideas, and we kind of go into like the history of Seattle, like all the way back to Baby Got Back to Macklemore's Thrift Shop, like,
Mm-hmm.
and compare it to that and what was going on at the time, like
Yeah.
nationwide.
To give it some context, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So we find a lot of album reviews are just like, this album is 94 minutes long. This is composed and written by blah, blah, blah. It was recorded in blah, blah, blah studios. This is a great album with a tapestry of woven. Anyways, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to make ourselves seem a little more intelligible. But at the same time, we want to switch up from that classic like 50-50, or in some cases 90% goes to the label model.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, honestly, I see why record labels do that, so they can have overhead for tackling new projects and maybe even risky projects that are less mainstream. Like, I appreciate what Sub Pop's doing. It's great. But again, they're a little bit more of the traditional way. And for us, we're aiming for 70% to the artist, just off the top for physical merch. Also, we are aiming to kind of do a huge change in the music industry, which is replacing PVC vinyl with PET vinyl. And that's
what's the difference there?
So PVC is polyvinyl chloride, and off gases into chlorine in the air and other volatile organic compounds. And it's a carcinogen, basically. It's kind of like that. It's the exact same thing that was spilled in that train spill over in Ohio last year.
Yeah.
So there's still repercussions from that spill. You have livestock being poisoned, and that's because they spilled polyvinyl chloride. And there's a number of things, but number one, PET plastic is recyclable. Like in a closed system, 100% recyclable. So it doesn't degrade, doesn't off gas. It has a higher tensile strength, and it takes less energy to press.
Wow.
So in addition to being better for your health, you'll get a sturdier record, and it'll be less toxic for the environment. So we're releasing our first one of those, an album called Vandal Hands of Man. That's going to be on Earth Day. So I think I'm technically I'm announcing this for the first time.
Oh, goodness.
Right now. So yeah, we're doing an Earth Day release. Earth Day release on a new medium, totally new medium for music aficionados and lovers. And I hope it takes on, because vinyl has to end, and PVC production of anything, I think, has to stop, because not to mention the plasticizers that are used in them. And a lot of the cheaper record companies, you'll find they use lead, or I don't want to get it wrong, but lead is a really common cheap plasticizer for PVC. And to me, it's just like, it's a 90-year-old technology. It's time that we find a better material for this really loved technology.
Yeah.
I personally love for collecting records.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you're making a really good case for physical media. I mean, for those of us, who may not be completely in the know about the technology. This is incredibly illuminating, but like, how do we make that change to help people understand that the future should be more physical media than digital streams and all of this, stuff that we have online?
That's funny you asked me that because a local zine just asked me the same question along with three other local record label owners. And I sat down pretty quickly and was able to make my list of like, okay, why is physical media important? And, I could read through that, but a lot of people, I think, innately know why it's important. Not to mention, like, the fact that you never see a hardcore Christian without a Bible. Is the same thing said about a musician. You never see a hardcore musician without a record or CD collection. And okay, working back from there, it just makes more sense. It's cheaper to listen to music that way because you have no ads to go through. You don't have to get an expensive computer or cell phone to listen to it on too. And a lot of people forget that non-physical media still takes a very physical phone and very physical computer and very physical speakers to play it. So this connotation between like download codes and non-physical albums being non-physical is just kind of like funny to me because you almost need more equipment and you have to pay monthly for the data that you're using on that equipment to listen to that on, where it's completely different with a record. That being said, there's things that have to be changed about the physical media. Like it to me, it always comes back to PVC. Like that's the importance of collecting, and that's the importance of getting away from it too. Because where do records belong? They belong in people's collections, not in the landfill. And there's literally nothing else we can do with it. We can't burn it. We can't recycle it. Actually, you might be able to shred them up and use it in lower grade PVC products, but PVC as a whole is getting phased out. You'll have too many particulates if you want to recycle PVC into records. And so that's why if you ever want to press an ocean plastic record, you have to sign a disclaimer saying, this might not sound good because there's so many particulates in there.
Wow.
So to me, like, yeah, it's important. It's imperative that we have physical music to collect because people are going to find a way to collect physical music. And it's going to end up being on a computer or on a sustainable medium. And I mean, as much as I love records, I think they should stop being produced and we should start collecting. And then it should be phased out with PET plastic records, kind of like CDs are using recyclable plastic in there, and same with tape housing.
Yeah. So I'm kind of starting to think about why. I mean, obviously, we have to be conscious of the environment, but I wonder when that started for you. Like, has your family or have you always been conscious of the environmental repercussions of this stuff? Or when did you find that interest or that passion for environmental concerns?
So growing up and like working for people, I've always had a critical eye on like what is done with the waste material and how harmful are the products that are going into the industry that we're doing. So that was always in the back of my mind as an employee. But as we started this record label, it was quick. Like it just started up and we had a client, de-esser, and we went right into production of a vinyl. And my one wish is that I wanted, since something so bad happened to me, I wanted just to put something good in the world. And I really wanted to put something good in the world. And I went into production. We did so much work with PR and getting the word out there and organizing a show for Victor or for de-esser. And all that happened and we were in production all of a sudden. And I was honestly on YouTube and I was watching a musician's show that I was a fan of. And he made this point about polyvinyl chloride and off-gassing and health risks. And so that was kind of honestly devastating to me because all I wanted to do was contribute something good in the world, and it turned out to be toxic. And that was a horrible feeling because it was a great album with great lyrics. And then I came to find out that, yeah, this is ultimately in 100, 200, 300 years, not very good.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and that was a bad feeling. So that's when I started researching. I got in contact eventually with a couple of companies over in the Netherlands who happened to have a representative over in Nashville and a branch for their company called Green Vinyl Records. And they're the only company in the world that's doing PET recyclable records. That's
Wow.
been since 2020 when they first started up, I believe.
So it's pretty new technology then, that's starting to make waves.
Yeah, I mean, rumor on the street is the that company Disney is working with them right now as well. But yeah, it's a hugely, very, very new
Mm.
project. I think they even have been modifying the efficiency of their factory, and they've gotten it down to like a ridiculous percentage more efficient than any vinyl factory just in the last year.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I definitely suggest go and follow them on Instagram, Green Vinyl Records, and follow their websites and stuff. Like awesome stuff.
That's great to hear, man. And I only got a couple more questions to be mindful of your time here. This has been awesome, but let's talk about kind of where the future is now for the Washington's records and for your personal songwriting and sort of creative projects. It seems like this record is sort of lined up already. It's pretty much good to go.
Hmm.
What are you looking to work on next time? What is the next thing on the horizon for you?
So I'll do something a little different. I'll go far in the future and then I'll reel it back in. But okay, 5 years from now, I want to have finished my rewrite for the Lyak lore story. Um, because I have a handful of voice actors and I have this instrumental version of the album that is timed up with the voice actors, with the narrator, and everything. So I would like to, in 5 years, have a finished, rewritten version without the likeness of any characters, and have it fleshed out with an artist's rendering of some of the bigger scenes, reminiscent of Gorilla's early sketch work. Yeah, I'm thinking Rhinestone Eyes back in 2010. They still have a kind of a sketchbook music video of that up there.
Mm.
Um, so in 5 years' time, I can see myself being complete with the rewrite and having a new phase of Howling Brave that follows up Lyak. But stepping back from that a little bit, like 4 years, this coming summer, we're going to have a really cool collaboration with this Tacoma band called Bearvex. And I just heard the demos and the not the masters, but the demos for the album. And to me, it's kind of like this Gorillaz Beck inspired EDM punk album,
Mm.
eco punk kind of. And so we're going to release this as well on PET record. Hopefully, with it being like that eco punk crowd over in Tacoma in the Northwest here, it takes off and we can afford doing another PET the
Mm.
following year. But preceding that summer release that's coming up here, we have the Earth Day release, which is
Mm.
Tim's. It's going to be a see-through record, PET plastic, completely recyclable, and the first for sale, first recyclable record for sale in Washington State,
Mm.
and that's going to be on Earth Day. Reeling it in even more, though, we have a show, this place called the New Prospect Theater, that's going to be happening on a Tuesday, actually, and we're going to be doing number of those, and hopefully get a lot more local bands to do. Like this is an unplugged show coming
Mm.
up, but we're hoping to do a lot more venue-based rowdy shows, and something a little dream on the books too is to be one of the first labels or bands to play on the local world famous Galbraith Mountain. And I know that you guys have mountain bikers up there. So if you look up Galbraith Mountain, that is a place worth traveling to. And not, I hate to be the tourist guy, but like that is our record label's dream is to have a concert during one of the slalom races that go on up at Galbraith Mountain, and we think that would just be a blast because that already happens up at Mount Baker with the ski slaloms, and we think that that might be a fun yet untapped live show that we can make kind of regular up in the Northwest here. Lots of pots on the burners. That's all.
That's the way to be. That's a perfect way to be. You touched on something that is quite meaningful to me because I'm trying to find a better way to be a part of my community. And one of the things I've admired about Washington, and I lived in Seattle for a little while. You know, my wife and I lived there about 10 years ago, and I was really taken by how powerful and how awesome the creative community was. And I'm curious if you could share a few thoughts about what makes a good creative community work, like the one that you're in, because it seems like a very supportive group. Like, what does it take to foster something like that, you know, to make it work the way it does over there?
You know, there's all the cliche things like showing up to people's events and like supporting local venues and buying CDs. But what comes down to it to me is this really simple phenomenon where somebody writes a song and they give it to their friend who they think will like the song. And whether they're in the same band or in different bands or solo musicians, I think that very phenomenon is the base of every music community. Like, hey, I made this song, and like, can you listen to it? And I've seen maybe the strongest connections happen from bands covering other bands' songs. And to me, it's hard to have a higher level of honor to than having your song covered by somebody. And you know, communities like Aaron Freeman and Mickey from Ween did the same kind of thing, and out of that was born these historic relationships between like Ween and the Dead Milkmen. They say that they knew each other. They gigged and were pen pals even at one point.
Mm.
And so what it comes down to is having these songs, which are not just songs, they're kind of philosophies or ideologies. And the reason why people like songs is because they offer identity. And the more that a community can agree on one identity, like the more that you can have empathy for each other. For example, I've been working on some local covers, and I might not go to this band's shows a lot. I might not even buy their merch, but to me, my way of supporting them is by learning how the lyrics and the chords to one of their songs.
Mm.
That's a little bit of a lame answer, I'll admit, but I think it's also not said enough. Like, community, yeah, go to your shows, go to your local venues, and buy the merch and buy the CDs. Also, share the songs that you like that you've written.
Yeah.
It's fun feeling when you might be lonely and somebody out of the blue texts you a song like, hey, I wrote this, what do you think? It's even a better feeling when you come out with an album and then a couple years later somebody's like, hey, can I cover this and release it, my own version of it? And that's just fun, in my opinion.
That's amazing, man. That's a beautiful note to end on. But before we wrap up, where can we find you on the internet? What are your handles?
So right now, WashingTonesRecords.com. That will funnel you basically to everything that you need. On there'll be a tab for our Bandcamp, so you can find all of our artists there, and I'm one of the artists there. And on the Bandcamp, you can hear my newest 2 acoustic singles called Better and Black Hole Rising. They're actually 2 songs on 1 track. And I won't suggest Googling my name and YouTubing it, because there's so many videos of people saying, "Wow, this 15-year-old guitarist," which in my opinion are just not the best performances. Before I started touring around the United States, I was kind of like, that fool of a musician. Like, I'm not going to practice too much. I'm just going to play and see if I can get some lunch money, maybe money for a joint too. And then, starting touring around the United States, I was like, maybe I should take myself seriously. And now I feel like I've come back full circle to just not trying too hard. But, at the same time, I'm like losing extreme amounts of sleep from all this effort I'm putting to the record label. So it's kind of just like, I'm so exhausted from the record label that, I can be more of an authentic self in my artist.
Mm.
Maybe I'm rambling. Oh my God.
No, man, but listen, I think it's incredibly admirable what you're doing. One of the hardest things to do is to try to give to the community, to serve in the way that you can. And listen, it's not easy given what you've been through and what you're experiencing right now. So I just want to thank you, man, not only for your strength, for your perseverance, but for the work that you're doing for your community. That is deeply important. No matter where you are or what you're doing, that is a world of good that you're bringing to the people around you. And so incredibly inspiring to me, man. Just keep it up. Love your music, and I love the stuff that's coming out of Washington's Records. So I highly recommend everyone check it out.
Thank you so much. And likewise with you. This is a great channel. I'm glad you're helping out your community as well.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to let you enjoy your Sunday. Please take care. Thinking of you. Keep making some awesome art.
I know. Cool, man. You too.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.